What local conservation efforts are important to you? And what action or advocacy efforts would you take to increase awareness?
Well, talk about the drought and then the smog are two separate issues. Right. With regard to the issues involved. For example, most of our smog comes from elsewhere, from Los Angeles, from Orange County, and so forth. And so there's really not too much we can do about that as a city. Whereas something like the drought, although again, our conservation efforts are limited in terms of looking at conservation needs to take place regionally and then with regard to all California. And I think that's partly the issue that must be understood, that we need to work through the various water agencies at the state level, and also with regard to the air quality. I'm trying to think what the California Air Quality Management Board, with regard to the kind of air quality that we possess in the city. From my personal point of view, with regard to drought, I've always been amazed that we have so many lawns in Southern California. And of course, I've owned my own house, and I've tried to keep my lawn up green, except now this year. I think that we really need to recognize the fact that that we're living in almost a desert, and I think we take some examples from Apple Valley and from Palm Desert and so forth, that there's a lot you can do with a more drought-resistant landscape with regard to rocks, with regard to decomposed granite and so forth. And I think we're seeing that. I think with more education, we need to have more examples, good examples of what would be an attractive alternative to having a lawn. I know there's people that will just argue to death in terms of they want to keep their landscaping and their shrubs and their green grass and so forth. But the point is that this drought, whether it's temporary or whether it's part of overall climate change, it just makes good sense to be concerned about the water supply. Because if in fact this is just a trend and it's not part of a general climate change, conserving water is just a good idea. On the other hand, if in fact we are engaged in a major climate change, then if we don't become more aware of conservation, we're really threatening the region. Mm-hmm. If we're wrong on climate change, it's really it's a very serious issue, rising oceans and so forth. And I think that more science really recognizes the fact that these are unusual times, and it's looking more and more that we need to take a close look at conserving specifically water. And so education, examples. You can talk all you want about alternative vegetation and landscaping and so forth, but I think we really need to see some good examples. So education and availability. We have a water department that sends out information on a monthly basis, and so I think that they could do a lot in terms of having demonstration gardens, in terms of providing examples of what people can do. Make it easy, facilitate in terms of transferring. And of course, that means jobs for people who put in new landscaping. With regard to, again, to smog, often that comes in from other areas. Although there are local problems. About 10 years ago, there was a concern about particulates coming out from our transfer yards, the Santa Fe, Burlington Northern, that were affecting the health of children in the areas associated with, because of the idling engines, because of the idling trucks that were located there. And there was some proof shown that, in fact, particulate matter was affecting the health of young people, and they could measure it in terms of the filters on top of schools and so forth. ICUC was engaged with that at the time. So we do have some local issues that has been, to a point, corrected. There's no more idling of trains. We have, as much as possible, shifted over to electric, these small engines that push larger vehicles around, and so there is much less issue.
So, like you mentioned, especially with smog, that is a little bit more kind of
Definitely regional.
It's a regional situation. So,
but there are some some localized, like again we're talking also along freeways. There's within 1,000 yards of freeways, there are particulate issues that affect, and so we need to be really more aware of where we build houses, and to make sure that if we have people close to freeways, that we really need to provide filtering options to make sure that the air they do breathe is within a house or within a building is cleansed.
So what it sounds like to me, one of the major things is educating about it.
Exactly.
And then there are some groups that are working to correct some of these more local problems, and so...
And the California Air Quality Board establishes standards, and they're the board that keeps track of air quality.
And with regards more the focus, one thing that you mentioned and you kind of talked more elaborately on is water, and that is something where, if you correct me if I'm wrong, so you're saying at the end of the day, if it is a short-term issue and we take initiatives to reduce our water consumption, and it'll help us. And if it's a long-term, then it's definitely going to be a good idea.
Yeah, it's an issue of survival, and I think that's important.
So then, are there any natural resources or systems that you think we need to protect locally?
Well, definitely water. The Mulvihill Basin, we're one of the few cities in Southern California that have our own water supply. There's been a lot of drawdown. We do have infiltration systems in the Cal State area, and we really need to make sure that what kind of construction takes place. In the past, we really made a lot of mistakes, a lot of pollution, trichloroethylenes, and I'm trying to think what the perchlorates were not well handled, and so in the north end of San Bernardino for decades there's been cleanup operations by the Environmental Protection Agency. But getting word from the EPA last summer that the water, the quality is substantially better, and they believe that one of the major pollution streams underground is back to acceptable levels, and the other pollution, there's two that go around basically the little mountain area. The other one should be cleaned up in the next 15 years, so it's not going to be a permanent